There is a kind of silence that does not come from the absence of sound, but from the absence of belonging. Imagine a woman sitting by her window at dusk, watching the dimming gold spill across her floor. No one calls her name from the next room. No one reaches for her hand. Yet something within her hums with a power she can't quite name. To the world, she is alone. But to the unseen dimensions that Edgar Cayce often spoke of, she might be closer to truth than anyone else. Cayce, the man called the sleeping prophet, believed that solitude is never an accident of circumstance. He claimed that every condition of a soul's life, even the aching loneliness that seems to crush one's chest, is an echo of choices made in the deep corridors of spirit. According to his readings, the woman who walks through life without a partner may not be cursed, abandoned, or forgotten. Instead, she might be fulfilling one of the most sacred contracts of her soul's evolution. But this notion defies what society whispers into every woman's ear from childhood. You must find someone. You are incomplete until you do. These messages, dressed in romantic ideals, are the modern echoes of an ancient belief that a woman's purpose is relational, never individual. And yet, Cayce saw it differently. He described the soul as inherently balanced between the masculine and feminine currents of divine energy. When a woman finds herself alone, she may be experiencing an internal alchemy, the reconciliation of both forces within her own being. In other words, solitude isn't emptiness. It's the furnace where integration occurs. Still, this idea unsettles many, because to accept it means admitting that the deepest human yearning, to be loved, desired, and chosen, might not always align with the soul's higher pattern. It suggests that what feels like deprivation could be sacred preparation. Imagine again that same woman by the window. The world might pity her, call her forgotten, or say she missed her chance. But what if her solitude isn't a wound, but a womb? What if she is not being punished, but reborn? Cayce would argue that she is in the process of remembering her completeness, something that no romantic partner could ever grant or take away. In his readings, Cayce warned that dependency, emotional or physical, creates karmic cycles that bind souls together until balance is achieved. A woman who has lived many lifetimes serving others, bending her spirit to please or protect, might in this lifetime find herself with no one to serve but herself. It is not punishment. It is correction. It is the soul's way of teaching autonomy before union. This raises a haunting question. What if the universe withholds companionship not out of cruelty, but precision? What if love, in its truest form, waits until one can stand whole, even in solitude? Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." For many women, the tribe has been the collective story that says fulfillment lies in the arms of another. But the woman who walks alone, Cayce might say, is one who dares to remember her divinity without reflection from another face. Her loneliness, then, becomes less of a void and more of a crucible. She becomes both student and teacher, both seeker and guide. Her stillness becomes sacred ground where she begins to commune with the only partner that never leaves, the soul itself. And so, the silence between two heartbeats, the one that feels like absence, might in fact be the divine whisper saying, "Now meet yourself." When Edgar Cayce spoke of karma, he didn't speak of it as punishment. To him, it was more like a cosmic balancing act, a spiritual accounting system through which every soul reclaims what it has forgotten about love, truth, and responsibility. And in this intricate design, the woman who finds herself walking alone might not be the victim of fate, but the architect of her own evolution. Cayce's readings often revealed that souls choose their circumstances before birth, not in a conscious way, but as an alignment of lessons needed for the next stage of growth. In one reading, he explained that certain souls, especially those who have lived many lifetimes in dependency or in service to others, reincarnate into solitude to restore their sense of selfhood. If one lifetime was spent clinging, the next might require letting go. If one life revolved around being needed, another might revolve around being free. To Cayce, this pattern was not random. It was love disguised as correction. He believed that within every woman lies the complete spectrum of human energy, both receptive and assertive, nurturing and creative, intuitive and logical. But when one polarity dominates, say, the feminine through self-sacrifice or the masculine through control, the soul becomes lopsided. The experience of being alone in this life can therefore be the soul's method of integration. Without the distraction of another's will, a woman can finally hear her own. This idea challenges the romantic myth that love is about two halves completing each other. Cayce suggested something far more radical, two wholes choosing to walk side by side. That kind of union, he warned, cannot emerge until the soul knows itself apart from all mirrors. Thus, aloneness is not isolation. It's preparation for sacred partnership. But this notion cuts deep against cultural conditioning. From birth, women are trained to weave their worth through connection. Society doesn't just celebrate coupling, it canonizes it. The movies, the songs, the stories, they all reinforce a singular narrative. The woman's life finds its ultimate meaning when she is chosen. Cayce, however, viewed the soul's journey through a wider lens. Being unchosen in the eyes of the world might simply mean one is being chosen by the higher self for a greater work. And this brings us to the karmic mirror. According to Cayce, every relationship, romantic, familial, or otherwise, is a reflection of what the soul must still recognize within itself. A woman repeatedly abandoned may, at a deeper level, be confronting her own abandonment of her spiritual calling. A woman constantly rejected may be learning to accept herself without external validation. And a woman left in solitude may be facing the divine truth that the soul is never truly alone. It merely forgets its connection to source. This perspective redefines suffering. It transforms pain into language, the soul's way of communicating what words cannot. When a woman sits in her quiet apartment, hearing the echo of her own thoughts, it may feel like a void. But in Cayce's mystical framework, that void is fertile. It's the exact place where divine memory begins to surface, pulling her back toward her eternal identity. As she remembers that she is not half, but whole, she begins to radiate differently. Her energy changes. She becomes magnetic in a quieter, subtler way, not because she is seeking love, but because she has become love itself. The French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir once observed, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." In the spiritual sense Cayce described, solitude may be the furnace in which this becoming happens. The woman alone is no longer defined by her relationships but by her resonance. Her stillness becomes her revolution. By embracing her solitude, she ceases to wait for someone to complete her. Instead, she begins to understand that her soul was never waiting at all. It was orchestrating. And in that realization, she shifts from longing to knowing, from absence to alignment. There is a peculiar kind of strength that only reveals itself in silence. It isn't loud, nor is it displayed for the approval of others. It rises quietly, like dawn, inevitable, unhurried, and unstoppable. Edgar Cayce often referred to this strength as the awakening of the inner temple, the sacred space where the soul communes directly with the divine. And according to his readings, many women who find themselves alone are not being denied love. They are being summoned into that temple. Cayce believed that every soul carries within it a spark of the divine creative force. But to access it, one must first walk through the shadow of separation. The absence of a partner, the ache of loneliness, the questioning of purpose. These are not punishments, but initiations. In solitude, the noise of external validation fades, leaving the soul exposed to its own reflection. That reflection can be frightening at first, but it is also where the first light appears. When a woman stops defining herself through the eyes of another, she begins to see through her own. And in that seeing, a new kind of awareness blooms, one that Cayce described as spiritual sight. He insisted that solitude often awakens clairvoyance, intuition, and empathy, because the psychic channels open more freely when one's energy is not constantly entangled in the emotions and expectations of others. What the world calls being alone, he might call being tuned. This is why many mystics and healers, especially women, are often drawn to periods of withdrawal. They are not escaping life. They are preparing to serve it from a higher frequency. Cayce suggested that the woman who learns to dwell peacefully within her solitude becomes a vessel of healing, both for herself and for those who will cross her path. Her presence begins to soothe others, not through effort, but through resonance. Yet the path to that peace is not easy. It requires confronting the ghosts that loneliness conjures, the fear of invisibility, the ache of unshared dreams, the silent questions that come in the middle of the night. Cayce would say that these emotions are sacred teachers. They surface not to destroy, but to reveal where the self still depends on the world for identity. Each tear becomes a baptism. Each night spent in solitude becomes a vigil of becoming. When a woman sits in meditation, prayer, or even quiet reflection, she enters the inner temple. Cayce taught that this space is not metaphorical, it is energetic. Within it, she can commune with the higher self, her guides, and even the divine source from which she came. It is here, in the silence, that the soul whispers truths that cannot be heard through the noise of companionship or societal chatter. To dwell there is to remember that power does not come from possession or proximity, but from alignment. The paradox is striking. The woman society labels alone may actually be the one most intimately connected to spirit, to intuition, to her authentic nature. Her solitude becomes her initiation into sovereignty. Her independence, once seen as loss, becomes liberation. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things." For the solitary woman, that defeat is not humiliation, it's surrender. She surrenders the illusion that love must come from another. She surrenders the fear that being alone is failure. In that surrender, she steps into her true authority, the authority of self-knowledge. And in the glow of that awareness, something shifts. The ache lessens. The silence no longer feels empty. It becomes symphonic. She begins to realize that solitude is not a condition. It's a calling. It is the soul's invitation to return home, to rediscover that within her dwells not lack, but limitless light. This is the essence of the inner temple. Not walls, not worship, but awakening. There are moments in solitude when the quiet feels ancient, older than one lifetime, older than memory itself. It's as though the silence carries echoes from somewhere far behind the veil, whispering of choices once made, promises once spoken. Edgar Cayce often spoke of these echoes as karmic remnants, unfinished vows and intentions carried from life to life. And in his readings, he revealed something startling. Some women who live alone in this incarnation are honoring vows made long before they were born. Cayce described time not as a straight line but as a spiral. Every life touches the next, not through coincidence but through continuity of purpose. Souls carry imprints of their experiences, their loves, their losses, and especially their vows. These vows, spoken or unspoken, can shape the architecture of a lifetime. Some souls once swore fidelity to spiritual service, renouncing earthly attachments to devote themselves fully to the divine. In Cayce's understanding, such vows, even if made centuries ago, can ripple into the present life, manifesting as a mysterious resistance to romantic entanglement or as a life path defined by independence. Imagine a woman in the modern world, successful, intelligent, emotionally aware, yet unable to find or sustain a partnership. She prays, she seeks, she wonders if she's somehow broken. But what if her soul remembers a promise? What if, in some ancient monastery or forgotten temple, she once vowed to serve only spirit? Cayce suggested that these forgotten commitments still vibrate within the soul field, influencing choices, desires, even timing. Until that vow is consciously revisited or released, the soul may continue to fulfill it, faithfully and unknowingly. This, he said, is not punishment, it is fidelity. In Cayce's readings, he emphasized that the soul's purpose always surpasses the desires of the personality. The human self may crave love, connection, and physical companionship, but the soul seeks alignment, completion, and service. When these two desires conflict, tension arises. A woman may feel torn between her longing for partnership and her inexplicable peace in solitude. That tension, Cayce taught, is the soul's way of guiding her toward awareness. Once she recognizes the source of her struggle, she can choose, consciously, whether to renew her vow or release it. To release an old vow does not mean betrayal. It means evolution. The soul, having completed one chapter of service, may now wish to experience love in a new form, one that integrates spiritual purpose with human intimacy. But that new path can only begin when the old one is acknowledged. Cayce encouraged prayer, meditation, and dream work as ways to uncover these hidden contracts. In dreams especially, the soul speaks in symbols: the monastery gate, the cloister, the wedding veil never lifted, all metaphors pointing toward ancient commitments awaiting resolution. This concept reframes solitude not as an accident, but as a continuation. The woman alone may, in truth, be standing guard over her own spiritual promise. Her independence may be sacred stewardship, not loneliness. And when she honors that possibility, her solitude begins to shimmer with meaning. She becomes aware of her own continuity through time, of the vastness of her being. This awareness can transform despair into devotion. What once felt like isolation becomes service. Her life itself becomes prayer. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Cayce's teachings breathe this paradox into the soul's journey. A woman's solitude might only make sense when seen through the rearview mirror of eternity. Yet, even as she lives forward, into her days of work, reflection, and quiet, the soul is remembering backward, integrating, completing, forgiving. And in that remembering, she begins to move differently. Her solitude no longer feels imposed, it feels chosen. She carries herself with quiet authority, as though guided by something vast and unseen. Perhaps she is. Perhaps her loneliness was never loneliness at all, but loyalty, to a vow older than time itself. There comes a point in every seeker's journey when the longing itself dissolves. The hunger to be seen, to be chosen, to be completed fades. What remains is stillness, luminous and whole. Edgar Cayce taught that this is not the end of love but its highest form. For the woman who walks alone, this moment marks her true initiation. The realization that love was never something to be acquired, but something she has always been. Cayce believed that the soul's ultimate purpose is reunion with the divine. Every lifetime, every heartbreak, every quiet evening spent wondering why, is a movement toward that remembering. When the soul finally grasps that it is already united with its source, the compulsive need for external completion evaporates. The woman once defined by what she lacked now radiates from what she is. This is the sacred wholeness Cayce spoke of, the state in which the masculine and feminine energies within a person are reconciled, balanced, and harmonized. In this equilibrium, a woman becomes her own sanctuary. She does not seek love to fill a void, because there is no void left. She gives, receives, and creates from abundance. Her solitude ceases to be a condition. It becomes a temple of presence. But reaching this place requires a deep reckoning. Many women resist solitude because they've been conditioned to equate it with failure. Yet in truth, solitude can be the soul's most elegant form of self-education. It strips away the illusions, status, dependency, comparison, and leaves behind only what is eternal. Cayce urged those walking this path to be still and know, echoing the ancient wisdom that silence is not emptiness but fullness too vast for words. He suggested that when one learns to live comfortably in the silence, the soul expands its vibration to match the divine. And in that expansion, a profound shift occurs. The person stops trying to attract and starts to emanate. The feminine energy, fully awakened, no longer chases love. It becomes love's natural home. People are drawn not because she needs them, but because her presence reminds them of something they've forgotten in themselves. This is the point where karma dissolves. The cycles of abandonment, rejection, and longing lose their grip, for they can only survive in the realm of need. The soul that knows its wholeness breaks that chain. The woman who once wept at her own solitude now finds serenity in it. She becomes both the question and the answer, the ache and the balm. And yet, Cayce was clear. This state is not withdrawal from the world. It is engagement from a higher octave. Once the inner masculine and feminine unite, external relationships take on a different quality. They are no longer contracts of survival but collaborations of spirit. Love becomes not a dependency but a celebration, a meeting of equals, free and whole. The woman who knows her divine completeness can love without fear because she does not lose herself in love. She only expands. The philosopher Alan Watts once reflected, "No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now." That now is where Cayce's teaching ultimately leads. The eternal present, the moment where the soul stands unshaken, self-contained, radiant. In this luminous stillness, the woman alone without a man is not lonely. She is sovereign. Her life is not a waiting room for partnership but a masterpiece of integration. She has learned that love's highest truth is not, "I need you," but "I am you." Every breath becomes communion. Every heartbeat becomes prayer. And perhaps this is the shocking truth Cayce wanted us to see, that aloneness is not absence, but arrival. That the soul's final union is not with another body, but with its own divinity. And that the woman who walks alone is not forsaken. She is finally, eternally home.